They're lying to our children when it comes to British history. And it seems the BBC are the ones at the root of all this. What they seem to be doing is inserting black people into every single historic event. It's disgusting, it's racist, and it's fascist. Yeah, fascist movements consistently seek to rewrite and manipulate and erase history to achieve their political goals. Now, this historical revisionism is a fundamental tool for controlling the narrative, consolidating power and justifying their actions. Now, if these people from history were really black, I'd have no problem with that. I've found a few to show you, starting way back to Roman times. Yeah, if there's real evidence and data that a historical character was black, or we originally thought was white, I'd say teach it, absolutely. And I did read that schools were teaching that Vikings were Muslim, but that's actually not true. I've managed to debunk that. Now, what started me off was I saw a video yesterday with a handful of Pakistani youth saying that their dads and grandparents built our railways, hospitals and universities. And they're saying they put all the work in the country's more theirs than ours, which was a bit racist. So I did a bit of research just to make sure I wasn't wrong, and it's not true. Yes, it was the Navvies who built our railways and canals. I'll tell you a bit about them. I've gone a deep dive into them. Yeah, and the hospitals. The oldest hospital in England is St Bartholomew's, founded in 1123. Now, as for the universities, Oxford University, it doesn't have no official founding date, but teaching has occurred there since 1096. The University of Cambridge was founded in 1209 by scholars from Oxford who sought a new settlement. Now, many people of Pakistani heritage and others have worked on British rails and hospitals, contributing to the industry since their move to the UK in the post-war era. This contribution has often been unsung, to be honest with you. They were essential for keeping the rail networks and operations after the war. I guess because our population was a bit low after the war, we lost so many men. That's when their fathers and grandfathers, and we mustn't forget the English girls who worked the land and did all the jobs the men weren't there to do. So basically the BBC are coming over as fascists by lying and twisting history. Now, at the dawn of the Industrial Age, brilliant engineers were designing the first railways, but who took the hard graft of building them? That task fell to the vast gangs of itinerant labourers known as navvies. And it's said by the 1850s, 250,000 workers, a force bigger than the Army and Navy combined, had laid down 3,000 miles of railway across Britain, which connected people like never before. Now, this was the start of the Industrial Revolution, and this diverse workforce, though mostly English, included a large number of Irish immigrants fleeing famine, along with workers from Scotland, Wales and some continental Europeans. Now, the term navvy originated from navigators, the ones who built Britain's canal network in the 18th century, before they moved on to railway construction in the 1830s. By the standards of the day, them days, they were fairly well paid, but their work was hard and often very, very dangerous, and they required extraordinary strength and stamina to do the work, and they tended to travel from job to job. Navvies and their families lived and worked in appalling conditions, often in temporary shanty towns, usually in rough timber or turf huts alongside the bridges, tunnels and cuttings they had built. Now, these hard conditions and communal living meant that navvies evolved a lifestyle, culture and even language of their own, and they had a reputation for fighting, hard living and hard drinking, and the so-called respectable Victorians viewed them as degenerates and a threat to social order. But much of the criticism was unjustified, because they didn't want to go out and do the work, did they? Really, they were unsung heroes of the day. The Navvies managed to achieve amazing feats of engineering, equipped with little more than gunpowder, picks and shovels. These rough-arse manual labourers were essential to the dreams of engineers like Isambard Brunel and George Stephenson. Yeah, much of their work involved immense earth movements for cuttings, embankments and tunnels. And in the 1840s there was no compensation for death or injury. And obviously the engineers like Brunel and that resisted all efforts to provide their workers with adequate housing and sanitation, or safe working conditions. I read about the Woodhead Tunnel scandal. It was sparked by the fact that the death rate among the navvies who built the tunnel in the mid-1800s was higher than that of the soldiers who fought in the Battle of Waterloo. Navvies were being killed at the rate of nearly 500 a year. The scandal led to parliamentary inquiry, but its findings were not accepted not for years. But parliamentary inquiries tend to do that, don't they? When agricultural mechanisation took over in the Victorian period, it left many rural labourers without work, and they were absorbed into the vast gangs of railway navvies. And by the 1900s, nearly 5% of the population worked for the railways. In some larger cities, entire areas evolved to serve the railways. So things changed from the temporary movable navvy encampments of the early days to the now more familiar rows of workers' cottages still found in towns around the country. I used to live in one. These big companies in railway towns exercised a strong influence, providing staff with housing, education and amenities, but they also controlled workers and their families with an almost military discipline. In some places they ordered its workers to vote for company officials in local elections. So it's always been corrupt, has it? And the railway workers formed associations and unions to improve their working and living conditions, all to press for radical social changes. By the end of the 19th century, most of Britain's railway network was complete, and navvies had better food, housing and sanitation. So working conditions had changed too. When the Great Central Railway was built in the 1890s, the construction relied as much on steam as muscle power, and the number of navvies needed dwindled, but their lifestyle persisted as they moved to new construction projects. Some built railways overseas or turned to road building. History may have remembered the Brunels and Stephensons for the railway revolution, the ingenious businessmen and engineers who dream of a truly modern transport network. But without the hard work and sacrifice of thousands of navvies, their dreams would have never been realised. These were the workers who built the railways.